Hey guys, today we're going to be chatting with my good friend Giuseppe about some improvisation stuff. And the reason we have this great content for you today is because me and Giuseppe teamed up to make a really cool improvisation course on his platform. I'm really excited about it. It's like 4 hours of content and it goes very in depth on a lot of fundamental subjects and more advanced subjects. So if you want to check it out, links in the description. But now we're going to, cut to the podcast. So have fun and enjoy the podcast. And if you want to get good at improv, check out the course. See ya. I was working on this backing track recently, and it was very, very hard. And I sent it to you. This little modal backing track, and you told me you had a hard time about it. But I'd be really curious to hear why you had a hard time about it, because I think you're a great improviser, Giuseppe. So I'm wondering, why, what was going through your head when you were sort of checking it out.
Okay, so I guess a premise. I'm definitely not a jazz guitar player. I think you spend a lot more time on doing jazz than me. So
I don't know. I have a lot of friends that would like disagree with that because they play. Maybe I'm surrounded by jazz more than you. That's probably what it is. I definitely don't consider myself a jazz player, but there's a lot of culture here in Montreal, so maybe I'm just kind of surrounded by it.
right. Yeah, I'm definitely I don't really listen to that type of music. I don't really breathe that culture. So that's definitely one of the things that I think when it comes to improv, it's always in some way based on jazz, right? In some shape or form. Like
Sure.
I feel like it kind of stems from that type of music. And so, but I guess here's the first question that I have for you. It's something that I always wonder. Like, do you think it's necessary to learn, let's say, jazz chord changes, like 2-5-1s, stuff like that, jazz vocabulary, in order to improvise?
Yes and no. I think it's kind of a question about like having your bases covered. Like if you want to be like very well rounded and versatile, you can't kind of get around it. I would even argue that I haven't done enough jazz for this sort of thing that I'm describing. Like if you want to be truly versatile and have like good vocabulary, yes, you gotta check out some standards. But in terms of like the mindset of improvisation, like no, like you don't really have to be. You don't really have to like know any theory. You just have to be like really comfortable on your instrument and be sort of comfortable with the idea of like expressing yourself like spontaneously. But in terms of like the application of various concepts, the best way to sort of build your skills is to kind of go through the standards. Like I definitely, with my students, I look at a lot of standards, but I don't necessarily stick around to the really straight ahead, like ding ding da ding sort of tunes. I kind of use them as like stepping stones towards tunes that are more modern with like more interesting changes. Because the sort of way to approach a standard remains the same regardless of what standard. Yeah, I think like if you don't know how jazz works, you're going to have a hard time. So at the very basic level, you should sort of be able to approach it. Regardless, you don't necessarily have to spend like 2 weeks like transcribing Charlie Parker. Like I don't really care about that. It's more if I show you, if let's play all the things you are, like, can you do that? It's a very low level thing. And then those skills that you have, that you've acquired from playing that tune, you can transfer to every tune, every jazz standard. But also these skills transfer to like other tunes. Like I think of most music that way, except when I'm riffing. Riffing is different because you're learning set parts, right? But when I'm learning like R&B, or even when I'm writing and there's riffs and I have to sort of produce it further, like I think about it in the sort of same way that I think of standards, so that I can have like a more intuitive approach to the harmony that's happening.
That makes sense. So, okay, I guess because I feel like most people, at least in our space, obviously only care about improvising, not really to become jazz players, but to have that I guess to develop that connection to the with the instrument that allows you to write better music, right? Because I feel like
Yeah.
improv is really connected to writing in a lot of ways, right? So what would you say to someone who's trying to get better at improvisation in that regard?
You mean like to relate it to composition?
Yeah, to like in the way that I guess us in kind of a modern guitar scene sort of approach that, right? Not to play jazz standards
Yeah.
necessarily, maybe as a tool to get there, but to you know what I mean? Like it's just get that sound that's
Yeah.
influenced by fusion or jazz or stuff like that.
Well, so yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. I guess like improvisation and composition are very, very closely related. The only difference is that one of them you're kind of doing like right there on the spot right now. Whereas like composition, you can really, really take your time. So anything that you learn in order to improvise, right? This sort of knowledge of harmony and sort of like the vocabulary of things that you pull from either like guitar voicings or lines or whatever, you can kind of take your time with it a bit. You can be more relaxed about it if you're sort of composing, right? Like, sort of theoretically, I could write the perfect solo if I just write it, right? Because I'm thinking of everybody note. Whereas like an improvisation, it's more like, you kind of throw everything at the wall and you see what sticks, and it is what it is. But I don't know. It's just like, for me, when I see like a piece of music and a set of changes, I see things that are, it's a very like, okay, let me sort of try to explain this like properly. If we see like four chords, let's say we see like a G major, G major, A minor, C major, E minor, right? Like a simple chord progression. So when I see that on a piece of paper, or, someone tells me that's what we're going to play, there's a lot of implications, right? There's a lot of, I see right away, like what home key we're in, like what modes like are appropriate to each chord and what extensions I have to play, maybe some other spicy things I can get away with. From that one chord symbol, like E minor 7, I see a lot of possibilities, from which I can, a lot of things that I can interpret from that chord symbol that I can then put into a guitar part, whether it's an improvised guitar part, like for a rhythm part, or it's like a solo. And this sort of baggage that is associated with like harmony shorthand, like chord symbols, like, if I say we're playing like a flat 6-5-1, like, what I'm talking about. There's a lot of information in that quick statement. So I think that's the sort of stuff that people need to get under their fingers and learn, because then you sort of gain access to all this vocabulary and all this language. It's putting aside the concept of jazz language specifically, that's not what I'm talking about. But like, if let's say we talk to a guitarist or any musician that doesn't really like play out much, kind of practices in their room, maybe records all the time, doesn't listen to like too much music, but just writes a lot of music, and they're pretty good, If I ask them, okay, like, let's play a flat 6-5-1 in the key of C minor, they might miss some things that I would believe to be very obviously implied about this stuff. Like, for example, it might not be obvious to someone that in every stylistic situation where you would play a flat 6-5-1, the 5 would be an altered 5, right? People will just assume that it's minor, and that's fine too. You can play it as that. But like, if you are surprised that I played like a 5, I don't know, like a 5-7 sharp 9 or something, in that 5 chord going back to C minor, what that tells me is you haven't listened to enough music, or you haven't played out enough and encountered people that are better than you. And that's fine, like everybody's on their own journey, but I feel like these two things, the sort of listening to music and sort of recognizing genre stylistics, is important, because music, the theory is just kind of a shorthand for communication, sort of putting things down, but I think it comes from like a much larger culture of music that is played and listened to, which is why you get guys that don't know any theory, but when they play music, they kind of know everything that I'm talking about. They already know it. Like they have it down. So I think it's better to be on the side of the guy that's like living through the music with less theory, rather than the guy that has all the theory, but like that can't hang because of some technicalities, because he didn't listen to this genre. And I also don't want to seem like I'm like a I don't want to seem like a listen to the record Nazi. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. Like, it's just like, there's a lot of stuff that it's hard for me to teach and to convey without telling you that you just have to like listen to the music.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? Like, am I going on too many tangents?
No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm trying to think from the perspective of someone who maybe sort of understands this, but can't really internalize this yet. So how do you get better? Something like this at improv.
Well, assuming you have all the bits together, right? Like, assuming you have like all the little theoretical stuff, you know, let's say you understand chords already and you kind of know like what skill to put where. Because if you don't know that, then you have a little bit of work to do, and that's okay. But if you kind of understand solos and how to make them, I think the next thing is to sort of get the sort of exposure to the musical context, like in a repetitive way. And that can be like in rigorous practice, but I think it's more appropriate to make it into either a performing situation or sort of playing with other people at the very least situation. Because I think like my biggest like progress musically has been because I'm playing with good bassists and good drummers, right? So if you have all the bits, but you're also not experiencing music in the sort of more lifestyle way, I think that might be something that's like missing a little bit. And you know, like there's also people that are amazing composers, but that aren't like great like musicians, and that's okay too. Like, everybody's on their own journey, but in this sort of because improvisation is a performance thing, right? Like, I don't think I know someone that is a great improviser like in front of their computer when they're playing record, but that isn't a great improviser like when they go out to the club and they're just like playing like improvisations. It kind of goes both hand in hand. The computer situation is just a little bit more forgiving. But it seems to me that like most people that have that struggle with this, it's because they're not putting themselves out there either with a group of friends or like, you know, maybe in a less forgiving situation where they might just get wrecked. And you know, to kind of give you like the other extreme, like I know a lot of people that are, you know, not particularly amazing, you know, but because they're like living the music, they're getting gigs, you know, and they're like solid musicians and they can hang to some extent, you know. So I think like on this subject of improvisation, that's better than the guy who has meticulous chops and a deep understanding of harmony, but then when he's playing in front of people, it all falls apart.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I agree on this, but I also feel like there's because you started with assuming you have the like your stuff together in terms of knowledge. I feel like there's a lot of people who might maybe thinking that they have that together, but they're missing on like the deeper level of understanding that.
Sure.
Which is kind of why.
Sure.
It's kind of why we basically put together the course, right? Which, you know, spoiler alert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should be already out, so link in the description.
Yeah. That's right.
But you know, like going through those basic, like there's a whole module, like, you know, hours of videos on basic harmony, right? Basic chord function.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm saying about living the music thing is something that you should be doing like at the same time of all this stuff. You know, when I was getting my fundamentals together, I was also going out and sort of jamming and getting my ass handed to me by people that were older than me. It was a great experience. But yeah, like the you know, to sort of like talk a little bit about the course, the way it's kind of set up is that we go through all these fundamentals at first, right? There's sort of I guess I don't know if it's called that in the course, but when I was talking to you about it, I called them the sort of prerequisites, right? Like if you're like sort of scale function and modes and chords and stuff like that. I guess we could talk about like what I think is sort of like the necessary sort of theoretical level to kind of move forward on this, because there's a lot of people that don't know theory, but when they don't know theory, they have tremendous ears, right? So they end up like having their own theory and their own way of categorizing stuff. But for me, because I don't have like tremendous ears, I find like theory and sort of chord function and all this sort of conversation about like the assumptions from like a chord symbol kind of makes up for my lack of ears. And let me just, I think there's one big theoretical subject that kind of all of a sudden makes you into a sort of professional level like guy. And it's once you understand like how chord function works, right? Like from an analysis like standpoint, kind of like we were saying earlier, like if I tell you we're playing a flat 6-5-1 chord progression in C minor, without even tell you the chord qualities for each of these chords, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And once you get to that level where it kind of becomes obvious to you, that's where you are like at the level, in my opinion. And to get there, like there's some work to get there. Like it's definitely, you have to really understand like your modes and sort of, what makes them special and the sound relation to each mode, and then how those relate to chords. Because, if people don't really understand this yet, the point is that every specific chord in a specific place in the key, belonging to the key or not belonging to the key, will be associated to a specific scale. And from this scale, you can pick notes to make your various creative decisions. Now, once you get a deeper understanding, it's a bit more intuitive than that. You start hearing melodies and all that stuff. But before you get to that point, the sort of training wheels is that a 2 chord in a major key? Okay, like if I want to put extensions on that chord, I have to pick notes from Dorian. Or if I want to play a line, I'm going to put notes from Dorian. Right? Or like, a 5 chord in a minor key, I guess I have to put some alterations on that. Maybe I'm going to play the diminished scale. Or maybe actually I didn't like how the diminished scale sounded. Maybe let me try this other option, the altered scale, over this 5 chord in a minor key. And that sort of approach to it and sort of understanding not only makes it that whenever you're handed a piece of music, you can sort of perform it, because you'll have like a bag of voicings to play chords from, so you can make up your guitar part, whatever that might be, and then you'll have a bag of vocabulary to play over when it comes time for you to solo.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So I feel like there's mostly to sum up kind of everything we talked about so far, or everything you said so far. Like there's really two components, the way I see it. And I guess 2 approaches that people should follow if they're trying to get better at this, right? One would be, like you said, the basics, which is something that I really stress in my own lessons, for instance, with my students. For me, the basics are what most people usually miss. Because you're like, okay, you know the pentatonic scale, but you don't know how to play that really well with 100% fluency on the fretboard, right? Which is where most people stop. And then there's...
I guess like the reason why I'm sort of dismissing this throughout this discussion is because I feel like a lot of my peers and the people like every day around me, like when we're doing this work, like it's sort of assumed that you know this stuff. So if you don't know, and it's like bottom level, like, if you're not underneath this, if you're underneath this threshold, like you can't really do any work. Right. So I guess, like, I don't know, there's sort of long term, like, looking into the future, 2-3 years of like, not like hard work, but consistent work that like one has to do to sort of get these fundamentals together. And, there's like scale maintenance and scale practice and sort of really understanding this stuff, and then learning a lot of music. And if you kind of are diligent with it over time, you'll just understanding. It's like learning a new language, right? You have to like do the baby steps, and then you have to like speak the language. right? Like the stuff that we're talking about isn't it's not complicated to learn. It's not easy, but it's simple. You know, like it's simple to do what we're talking about. And you know, like for example, like here's something that I give to students pretty early on when it comes to scale practice. That maybe I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, because this definitely like kicked my ass when I was getting my fundamentals together. So okay, so I have this like scale exercise thing, which basically is a game of variables where, you know, you have some set variables and you change them every day, so that every day your scale exercise is a little bit different. So these variables might be, you know, obviously like the key, the scale pattern, and how you orchestrate it on the neck, right? 3 notes per string, position, 4 notes per string, whatever. So today you might be like, okay, well, I'm going to do A flat, Phrygian, in thirds, 4 notes per string. That'd be really difficult. And then here's the sort of the catch is that you want to do it right the first time. And you have like, you know, you want to give yourself like one attempt. And so you want to do it so slow that you do it perfectly up and down. And so I've changed it a little bit since, but I had this exercise when I was in jazz school. And on my exam, I get one try and then or I don't get it. So my teacher would be like, okay, this position, this scale, this pattern, and this key, go. And there was actually another variable that he added. He was doing like, I had to do it in a specific rhythm. So we would sight read a rhythm, you know, like da 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 da, something dumb like that. But it was always, all these things were different. And so he would pick the variables and then would have to do it. And so the only way to show up to the exam and nail that stuff is to randomize these variables every day before that, the whole semester. Not in an effort to do every possible variable, that's kind of impossible, but in an effort to be so versatile that I can decide to do something and execute it the first time. So this exercise is kind of effective because you're practicing your modes, right? But you're also practicing the act of executing something like right away. And you know, the sort of the last little detail about it is as I tell students to sort of make it hard or difficult depending on how they're feeling. You know, if it's too easy and you go into autopilot mode, that's not very good. You want to kind of make it a little bit harder. But if it's so hard that you can't do it at all, then that's not good. You want to be in this sort of sweet spot where you're able to do it if you're concentrating. But if you're not concentrating, it sort of falls apart. That's where you want to stay in this little sort of Goldilocks zone, let's call it. Moves up higher and higher as you get better. So you want to make it harder for yourself and all that sort of stuff. So while I was building my fundamentals and sort of going out and playing music and learning music and improvising, you know, and doing that stuff, I would do that exercise every day. At least for like a year and a half, I did that every day. And then my teacher like stopped like caring too much because I kind of knew it. But it was one of these things.
But you know, this is what really makes a difference, in my opinion. Like, how many people would do this routine? Let's say people that are not in music school, right?
No, of course, it's tough.
This is what makes a difference, right? So going back to what I was saying, like, you know, it's the two perspectives, right? So the basics, the work, like the hard work, like what you're describing now, and I guess what you said earlier about just, you know, hanging out with musicians and kind of putting yourself out there and play a lot, which is also a component that, you know, a lot of people maybe miss, because, you know, obviously it's not easy to find situations where, like you said, where you get like the pros that really show you how it's done, and sort of where you can sort of humble yourself each time and know like what should be the direction to pursue. So yeah, it's just I guess it's really these two things. Like, if you want to get better at improv, you should have your basics together and you should play a lot with possibly good musicians.
That's right. It's definitely hard work, but I think, like, you know, everybody's on their own journey, and I think it's about what you want. Like, who do you want to be? Like, if you truly want these skills and to be this sort of prolific improviser, this is the kind of work that you have to do. And, you know, like, I get a lot of people that ask me like, okay, well, how do you find people to play? Right? Like I'm doing the work. I know I understand this stuff, like I'm writing music, but how do I find people to play with? And I think that's kind of work that you have to do as well.
Yeah.
You know, like I definitely to kind of bring it back to the sort of music lifestyle thing. Like I definitely had to put some work into my own life and sort of to cultivate like the community side of it, right? Because it's good for your skills too, you know, like if you're scared of getting wrecked, you know, if you get wrecked once, trust me, you're going to do the work. You know, there's nothing quite as humbling as like, you know, you think you're good, you know, and then you go do a thing, and then it's and then everybody that you think doesn't sound that good is like keeping up way more than you are, because at the end of the day, like you realize that it has nothing to do with like chops specifically. I definitely had that experience. I was definitely like a little bit full of myself, and then I got humbled like real quick, like when I started to really experience like what it's like, what needs to happen for me to be good.
Yeah, dude, like 100% still happens today for me. So, you know.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's also okay to not want it. But I think that's something that everybody has to like decide for themselves. Like if you decide that you want it, you want to be good, like this is the sort of work that you have to do. Because like I said earlier, like at that level, it's assumed you know all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like no one's ever asked me like some oddly specific like chord scale question.
No.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of...
Here's an oddly specific chord question. So
yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay, here we go.
What the hell were you thinking with that last backing track? Maybe we'll play a section of it, but...
Sure.
What's going on?
Okay, so the last backing track, the modal backing track, so this is interesting. I definitely wrote this backing track before we were working on the course, so I don't actually remember like what I was thinking per se, because I think what you're asking specifically is what I was thinking with these the two altered chords. And I think there's two ways. I mean, I don't know. I forget what I was thinking back then, but there's two ways like you could think about it. So it's definitely like it's a modal track. So every chord is modal, and then the altered chord is also modal. So you're playing altered not in a cadential manner where you're going to resolve it to the one chord or whatever. You're playing altered as a color, and then going to the next color. Which I guess, you know, if you can, you know, we can get into this idea of tonal and modal playing, but that I think that's maybe a bit above the scope of this video. Instead of playing, okay, so like here's what I think is interesting. So the F sharp 7 altered, okay, resolving to A minor is a weird thing. You would expect that F sharp 7 to resolve to a B minor, okay? So what ends up happening is you can think about that F sharp minor resolving to a B Phrygian. And then that makes it resolving to the A Dorian. Because B Phrygian and A Dorian are the same scale, right? So if you think about it like that, you have like a modal resolution. So when you resolve to what would be the when you resolve to like the sort of fifth of the chord, okay, the you know, because you would do an altered line and then end on the fifth of the next chord, of the one chord, right? So the fifth of that B minor chord, okay, it would be an F sharp, okay. That F sharp is the Dorian major 6 of the A minor chord. So when you do a normal resolution, you end up on the color note of the A minor. So anyways, this is all very specific theory, but the sort of normal resolution ends up sounding like a colorful resolution on the A minor. And so on that chord, and then the D altered as well, it's just a different thing, but of a different angle. But so instead of thinking about it in a cadential manner, you do have to think about it like, okay, color, color, color. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's not like as big brain as it might seem. It's just purely modal, where you have like A Dorian, A flat Lydian, G minor, F sharp altered, and then you just play those as is, and then when you resolve altered like the way you're used to, it ends up being more colorful. The only other funny thing is I'm pretty sure I voiced those altered chords as minor 7 flat 13 chords, which are basically just like sharp 9 flat 13 chords with no major thirds, which doesn't really matter too much. It's just a voicing consideration rather than like the sort of greater harmony. Yeah, that's the chord. That's what I was thinking. It's a bit silly, but I think like listening back to it, it's very colorful and very beautiful. It was very interesting to sort of practice. I actually tried practicing it like with my trio a while ago, and it was terrible. It's just so hard. Also, that triplet groove is kind of cool as well.
Yeah,
it's a cool thing. What did you think of it? Like, what were you like thinking about it? I still haven't seen your video, actually. I should check it out.
Yeah, because I haven't sent it to you. I need to upload it. The way I interpret it, because I didn't obviously have the like chord charts, so like
it's true. I didn't give you the chords. Whoops.
Yeah, so and so basically, and this is actually my approach to like more jazz-based harmony, if that makes sense. Like for me,
yeah.
So for me, for instance, the whole naming chords for me doesn't make any sense. It's something that I've never used.
Like the Roman numeral you're thinking, or just
no, just like if you say B flat major 7 sharp 11. Okay, for me it's like I know what it is, I know what you mean, but I don't find it meaningful, if that makes sense.
So if I tell you that we're playing a B flat major a B major sharp 11, whatever chord you said, what would you rather I have said?
Well, that's the thing. You have to say something if you're thinking in a jazz improvisation form, because you don't have the sheet music.
Would you rather I say like we're playing a 4 chord?
No, that's the thing. Like because of my classical guitar background, where I have like just the notes, right? So you have
because you're used to seeing the entire voicing. Oh, I see. Whereas for me, it's the opposite. If I see the chord like written out, I quit the gig. Like I'm gonna get fired. There's no way I can read like. That's funny. This is a good thing. You should make the sight reading course next. People will love that.
Oh, dude, I kind of lost that skill. Just
the
second you leave music
for
school,
sure.
Unless you're actively doing that, like it's very easy. It's very difficult
I know.
to. You know what I mean?
I barely had it. And I lost it. But okay, that makes sense. So like, you would want me to give you like sheet music, and you would want to see me do what would it be? It'd be B, A sharp, D sharp, and then F, right? That's what you would want me to say for the B major 7 sharp 11.
No, it's not like I want you to say that, because it wouldn't make sense, right? Because it's.
But you want me to like you would want to read it like that.
I not necessarily, but I'm used to, right? I'm used to just read the chords, and then it's just a chord, like it, no modes, no names, you know what I mean? So it's like it's a slightly different mindset. And so when I approached that backing track, I was like, okay, what notes are being played, right? And I would just, for the F sharp, for me it's just F sharp, E, A sharp, C, right? And okay, yes. So F sharp altered, sure, but and then at that point you're like, okay, so with these notes, what scales can I play on that? There's a couple choices, and I kind of go from there, right? So of course, like if I'm talking to a musician, let's say we're playing and improvising, of course I'm just gonna tell you like F sharp altered, right? Because it's, it's like a convention thing where you can, like, that's how you name things, right? When you improvise.
Okay.
But like it could be like, what if that was just C7 with the major six in the bass? Sorry, with the sharp 4 in the bass, right?
That'd be cringe as fuck. That's interesting because okay, so I see what you mean, and I think like to clarify, like my ear training is not the best. I've always had trouble, except for guitar voicings. I've always had trouble hearing the way things are voiced, right? If someone plays a chord on piano and you ask me like to play the same chord on guitar, like the same voicing, no chance, zero, absolutely zero chance I can do that. So when I listen to music, I cheat a little bit with the bass movement, right? I hear the root notes kind of moving around, and then I hear the function, right? So if I hear an A bass note, and then when I'm sort of messing around on the guitar, my minor third works, my minor 7 works. I'm like, okay, it's a minor 7 chord, and then I can hear the rest. If there's a major 6 or a minor 6, right? So every chord is like that. I didn't necessarily hear that the voicing had a minor 3rd and a minor 7. It could be some more modal thing where there's no, like I'm not hearing like specifically what's in the voicing. That's always been very, very hard for me. But luckily it seems to not really get in my way at all, because I'm still playing things that work. Because there's only so many options, right? Like if we have a chord progression in a key, right? So, like when I say, like, I always think about the harmony as like this sort of idea, like, oh, G major 7, ooh, like idea, one chord. And then how I play that on the guitar is completely separate. I could play like an F sharp and a D, and that's what I'm going to play for a G major 7. Do you know what I'm saying? So I guess maybe that's the difference between our like sort of approach is is when I see things, I sort of assume a lot of stuff, and then I think about like whole scales or whole like functions. 5 chord, on a 5 chord I have these options, on a 2 chord I have these options. Whereas like you're thinking more, well, that makes sense with the way that you play too, because I always thought that like your sort of soloing ideas are more harmony based. Like if you play an arpeggio a certain way, you're gonna keep that sort of idea like in mind. Like if you play an A minor 9 arpeggio, you're gonna kind of keep that 9 going. Whereas for me, I have a sort of all 7 notes of the scale approach when I'm soloing. It's rare that I'm sort of omitting notes consistently.
Yeah, you'll definitely find it when you listen to my take. It's exactly what you described. So there's like consistent.
That's interesting.
Because to me, it sounds like when I do that, I go for a melody usually, right? So you would hear me just play a triad, like a basic triad, or like for instance on that altered chord, what I play a lot of times is just the like the I guess like the dominant 7 sharp 4, but like almost like in a triad form. So
okay, sick. That's hip.
Like F sharp, C, and C sharp. Does that make sense? Or I guess B sharp and C sharp. And it becomes almost like an arpeggio on its own. So I guess it's less like scale based and more like target note based. Even though, sometimes obviously you just want to like go through a scale and do like a faster run and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I definitely lack in my playing the sort of simpler arpeggio idea throughout a sort of section. That's definitely something that I lack. I'll usually have like denser harmony ideas, but then within those I'm sort of being like as melodic as possible. But I do like see that in a lot of great players, and it's something that I don't quite have access to. But again, it's one of these things. It's sort of it's sort of a control thing. Like I'll play like ambiguous arpeggios and whatnot, but I think they are ambiguous not as a result of me doing a constant harmony, a conscious harmony choice, and they're more ambiguous because the shape is interesting. And then within that, and then sort of that ambiguous sound will then inspire like some direction or something. But I am like targeting notes. I think more that when I'm targeting notes, I'm not targeting. I'm either targeting color tones or I'm targeting like thirds and sevenths. So it's less that I'm targeting like entire arpeggio ideas. But I don't know. When I try to play out, like you have to end up playing a triad or a pentatonic stuff. So I guess maybe I do that a little bit, but definitely not as much as you. Like you're more on top of that than me. Like you probably like play like 5 chords and you'll play like the major triad, like a tritone up or something. Like that sounds like something you would do.
I definitely try to keep things simpler as much as possible. So I'm a big fan of just, triad. Those like Pat Metheny style lines where it's literally just triads and it's like almost cheesy sometimes. That's kind of what I usually go for.
Okay, interesting.
So borderline cheesy.
I'm just like really into weird. Well, now I'm really into
yeah, you're like for
like
the spicy
simple
stuff,
direction,
like the spicy notes.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think right now I'm really into like simple direction, but sort of but involved like voice leading. Like I'm trying to have like, if you were to like tab out one of my lines, you could like circle like the sort of important notes, and then you could see that I'm going whoop and from under and from below and all that, and all that sort of stuff. I'm trying to have like more of a voice led sound to my lines, but it's happening with varying success.
No, I mean you're doing great.
Thanks for watching this conversation with my homie Giuseppe. Once again, the reason why we did this is because we teamed up on an improvisation course, and it's out right now. So if you want to check it out and get good, you should check the link in the description. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.